You are listening to the Night and Day podcast, featuring the interview archives of Western New York music writer Thom Jennings. Thom has interviewed some of the biggest names in music and entertainment, and now you can enjoy these never-before-heard interviews. Here's your host, Thom Jennings.
Well, hello everyone. This is my first ever attempted live broadcast of my podcast, Night and Day. It's a podcast that's been around for a while. I don't know if anyone will actually listen to it live. I literally just decided to give this a shot, so I threw it out to some social media networks, and I don't know if anyone will actually listen to it live, but I figured if we're going to do a test run, no better time than the present. But anyhow, I have, for fans of Todd Rundgren, this is an interview that's never been heard before. It's one that I conducted back in, well, I think it was, last month. So Todd was coming to North Tonawanda, the Riviera Theatre in North Tonawanda, New York, which is near Buffalo, if you're not in this particular area. And I did a quick phone interview with him. Usually you get about 20 minutes. I think it went a little bit long. But Todd talks about how much he was enjoying this last tour, which just wrapped up yesterday, I believe, and some other stuff. So I find it interesting. Hopefully you find it interesting. Again, this is partially just sort of a test to see if I can maybe put out some more podcasts, and instead of having to try to edit everything on Audacity, and this way we'll see if we can get stuff out quicker. But anyhow, here's the interview, and it runs 20 minutes and 55 seconds. Should anyone happen to make it into the chat room and wants to chat, I will be hanging around the house chatting. So, here's Todd.
What's up, guys? Hello.
Hey, Todd.
How's it going?
It's going great. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good, yeah. I would imagine after we're getting a little break in the tour, you're probably a little bit tired. I caught 3 shows, 2 in Atlanta, 1 in Cleveland, and I mean, it's an amazing show. I'm imagine it might have tired you out a little bit, but it certainly looked like you were having a great time on stage.
I am enjoying this show, even though I thought I would. I thought I might not, because it's so much of that sort of normal material, but we put it in, I guess, a little more interesting context, almost like a storytelling context. So it makes it a little more fun. I'm having fun with the audience reaction to all the familiar songs, because usually, it's not for any particular song 100% enthusiasm. Some people will recognize the song and then other people won't, and maybe will recognize it by the time I get to the second verse. But in this particular instance, this is all the stuff that pretty much everybody in the audience is familiar with, and so it assures a certain kind of reaction, and I'm having fun with that.
Well, that's great. It's interesting. I noticed as I was thinking back over the shows and everything that you drew heavily from side 1 of Initiation. In fact, I think the only song that you haven't done on this particular tour was the title track. And I'm wondering, is that because it was an album that was maybe inspired by that trip around the world that you talk about when you bought the Pan Am ticket, when you talk about that in the book?
I think that's part of it. I'm trying to highlight, without being too obvious, the evolution in the songwriting. The initial songs are quite obviously, traditional subject matter, relationships and such. And as time goes on, it starts to get into other different sorts of subject matter that have more to do with one's internal life, and trying to essentially highlight that, that evolution in a way. I do most of the talking in the beginning, and then as things progress, I tend to edit editorialize less and less about what the audience is hearing.
So I mean, you pulled. I mean, one of the deep cuts you pulled on this tour is "Fair Warning," which I mean, I imagine that the reaction from that you must have. I mean, I don't know. You must have known that was kind of a deep cut fan favorite. What made you decide to pull that particular song out? And it sounds amazing live, I must say.
I kind of knew it would be a bracketing song because it sums, the actual end of it sums up a whole bunch of other material. Just give me a second here. We got somebody at the door.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Well, if we could kind of get back to some other stuff that came up, and I know you've had a lot of time to talk about the book because you're getting the Q&A and everything in the shows and whatnot. Somebody brought up Ian Hunter, and you kind of said in a one-off, you're like, hey, man, it'd be great to work with him again. And funny enough, I interviewed Ian Hunter a few years back, and I asked him if he was into American politics, and that's why he did the John Anderson benefit shows, and he said, I couldn't have cared less about politics. I just wanted to play with Todd Rundgren, which I thought was a hilarious answer. Is that something you'd consider again? I mean, the guy's 79 years old, but man, he's still killing it live.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part, partly because somebody's talking really loud here, and then partly because you're on Skype or something, is doing that warbling thing.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm on a cell phone, but it was just asking about performing again with Ian Hunter. Just saying with
Ian Hunter.
Yeah, because, I mean, he's 79 years old, but he had told me once that he wasn't interested in politics, but the only reason he did those shows with you is because he wanted to play with Todd Rundgren. I wondered if that was something you guys ever revisited, because somebody asked you at the Atlanta show about it.
Well, it's, I would certainly love to play with Ian again, but I don't know how you turn that into, a full-fledged show. I mean, we went out and cobbled together a bunch of familiar stuff, did a couple of our own songs, did some, Everly Brothers stuff, it was just essentially to call attention to a third-party candidate. We thought a third-party, or at least I thought a third-party candidate should have a shot. And it didn't involve a whole lot of musical preparation. It was just a fun time for us. I don't see how we could, do something like that again without it having some purpose behind it, I guess. Just to do it for the sake of doing it, I don't think there's enough there. Like I say, we're fun together, get along together well, but really have not devoted each other to each other's material,
This is for a preview for a show in North Tonawanda, New York, which is near Buffalo at the Riviera Theatre. And I know you don't necessarily remember particular venues, but Rick Springfield played there a few years back, and as part of his acoustic show, he tells a story of coming to your house and trying to write a song, and it's kind of funny. He talks about getting stoned or something like that. Is that something you remember, or him showing up and you guys trying to write a song? And again, with something like that, would you ever consider working with Rick again? He's another guy who's still pretty active.
Well, I do remember the episode, and it's not an unusual episode from my standpoint. It's other similar things that have happened. Kenny Loggins did the same thing. He lives in the island chain, but he proposed coming over to write a song, and I said, I'll give it a try, but it's never been my strong point, just sitting down with another guy, Lennon and McCartney style, and bouncing ideas off of each other and coming up with a song. That's not how my process usually works. My process is actually to record everything about the song except the vocals, and write the vocals at the very end of the process. And it's often a result almost of something subconscious going on, where I'm ruminating about it for a very long time. And so it's hard for me to just sit down and, and start coming up with rhymes and melodies and things like that. It's just never worked. And the incident with Rick Springfield, was kind of the same thing. We talked a lot, looked at each other a lot, hoped that something would happen, but nothing actually ever happened. So
So then with White, I mean, was that the reason you did White Night the way you did? Because you figured, well, if I can take the chunk of the song and then I can fiddle with it, we don't necessarily have to be in the same room, because that had been counterproductive in the past?
Yeah, that removes a lot of the pressure to quick come up with something, because I like to think about things for a while. And so if somebody gives me an idea, I won't suddenly dive in and start fiddling with it. I will ruminate on it for a bit to see if something kind of presents itself in a way. And yeah, I find it's, for me, it's a much more effective way of collaborating, and it doesn't require the limits imposed by location or availability or any that sort of thing. Just send it off, let them get to it when they get to it. They send me something, I'll get to it when I get to it. Eventually it'll get done.
So, I mean, do you think that because, you did the White Night tour, which was amazing, and then you had Utopia, and then now this tour, I mean, eventually you're going to go back to working on a new album. Do you think the book and maybe going back to those, the old songwriting process will in any way influence what's going forward, or will you consciously try to avoid repeating what you've done in the past? Because that's kind of been your whole career, is just avoiding a repeat. And I'm wondering, though, if this could possibly maybe have the opposite effect, because you've really delved deep back in your past with the book and the show.
Yeah, well, I've got to get, I'm not in a rush to do it. The thing I have joked with everyone, involved in this tour is that, the response is so positive that whatever I do next is probably going to get on. So I have to, take my time, and not be in a hurry to move on to the next thing. I think we're going to see what the impact of this whole tour has been. I'm not working especially hard for the rest of the year. I got a little bit of touring, but not much. I've got a project in January that I've got to write that is at least the scope of an album anyway. So, although it isn't an album, it's a live presentation. So I will be busy writing, but it won't be for a new recorded release. Also, I have essentially a backlog of collaborations, and whenever I get the time, I do one or two of those. And we're trying to figure out a way that those can get released without having to accumulate a whole album's worth. Over time, there may turn out to be a whole album's worth, but people don't buy albums as much anymore. They tend to consume single instances of music, and then perhaps sometime we'll get to an album, but they won't even make the time to listen to the whole thing all the way through.
I mean, is that somewhat frustrating? I mean, I think in your case maybe it's a little different than a lot of other artists, because you do have this built-in cult following of crazy people like myself that do sort of hang on, the whole albums and everything like that. But again, like any artist, you get to a point in your career where there's always people that crap on it because it's new and they just want to hear the old stuff. But I think there's also fans like me that always love to hear the new stuff because we kind of know the old stuff.
Yeah, and I like to make new stuff. I don't like to repeat what I've done. And in that sense, the more stuff you have made, the harder it is to avoid repeating it. But as I say, I'm not in a particular hurry at this point to get to that next record. I do have a writing project to do before that, and that may turn in... likely the soundtrack for that will turn into some kind of a release. But I want to be able to address not only new music, but the new distribution paradigm, and how do I take the best advantage of that.
And you mentioned after these string of dates in June and everything that you're gonna take some time off. And I mean, honestly, as much as from a fan's perspective, I hate to see you take time off. It's almost dizzying to see how often you're on the road. I mean, I don't remember you having a 6-month break off the road in in, I don't know, maybe forever. Is that something you're looking at some point, just to kind of, I mean, you don't look tired. Your voice sounds great. I mean, everything's going, but honestly, I don't know how you do it.
Well, I still enjoy the performing. The production work is nearly non-existent at this point, so I have to make my living off of my own music, and the best way to do that is to go out on the road and perform it, and sell merchandise at your merch table and stuff like that. And it's amazing that there are other things that fill in the blanks. I haven't sold, I don't know how many records I've sold in the past 5 months or whatever, but I know I've sold plenty of books. So, as long as you're moving something, music has evolved to the point where, or at least the music business has evolved to the point where sometimes music is the least important thing you do. It's just a commercial for yourself. And what you're really about is, your personality, your self-marketing. You have your own line of sneakers. You get into Twitter fights with other artists. You show up wearing something ridiculous at a big public event. You get arrested, things like that. You wind up getting your name splashed in, the Apple News feed all the time, but it's hardly ever about music.
Yeah, I mean, in your case, it's interesting because, you're so good to your fans, and I think this book tour really gave you an opportunity to meet a lot more of them, just by design, you're signing books and everything like that. But man, and again, that's another thing. I mean, a lot of artists are kind of put off by their fans, but you really seem to embrace the opportunity just to spend a little bit of time with them. And I read stories all the time. People become overcome with emotion in meeting you, and I think that's pretty important for an artist to do. But it's got to be tough on some level.
Well, first of all, the most basic sense, this is my customer base, and anybody who runs a successful business, realizes it's about, in one sense or another, pleasing your customers or meeting your customers' needs. Beyond that, I have friends as well, who are amongst the fan base. A lot of the fans I haven't met, but many of them I have met at the fan events, and we've done things besides, being in a concert hall together. So it's, in some sense, it's my customer base. At the same time, it's my sales force. When I have a fan event, they all go back and tell everybody what a great time they had and keep my name in circulation and keep a good vibe around the brand and that sort of thing. So I recognize them as being, first of all, my consumers, second of all, my salesmen.
Yeah, I guess I would fall in that category for sure, but it's definitely a relationship that you've fostered over the years, and we certainly appreciate it. I got a couple quick questions because I want to keep this under 20 minutes, and I know you're busy. First one with regard to the book. Was it difficult? Because some of these stories are pretty raw. I mean, the one where you talk about, off the top of my head, the one in the alley where you thought you were going to get attacked, and, you talk about your marriage and bankruptcy. And you've exposed a lot about you as a human being. Was that scary, or was it artistic? Was it easier? I know you don't like to write from a mechanical standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint, was there anything that was really difficult to put onto paper or revisit?
Well, there are stories that you try and figure out, how's the best way to tell it. And since I did have certain rules about what the content of any particular paragraph should be about, it helped me sort of unravel the emotional aspect of it from the things that actually happen. But, what is the point of writing a book if you don't talk about yourself, if you don't talk about the important things that happen to you that make you who you are? You could say say that everything that's written about in the book has been metaphorically written about in the music. And all I'm doing is just filling in the backstory, the behind the scenes to what, actually made the music what it is.
All right, and final question, just kind of a quirky one. I know that at one point you were telling a story at, I don't know if it was at the Unpredictable shows or whatever, about Paul McCartney and how Paul would see you at events and not know you. And I read the story about you and Linda and, sort of the tie-in to the high school girl that inspired Hello, It's Me, and, your week with her and everything like that. I don't... Is that what was at the crux of the issue with you and Paul McCartney? And I again, I don't know. I've always found that sort of interaction that you had with Linda Eastman for a week kind of mystical in a way. I don't. Maybe if I'm just reading into something a lot more than it really is.
I don't think so. I had spent time in the company of Linda and Paul together. So, that's what, in one sense, what irked me, is that he pretends not to know me at times, when he certainly does know me. He knows that she took pictures of me. He knows I've been in her gallery shows. I've been to the gallery shows where she and he were there. And so it's to me, it's just this weird, I don't know what it is that is his problem, but I think that he thinks I care more about him than I actually do. I really don't. I don't want to be his friend or anything like that. I'm not that fascinated by him. And the idea that I, somehow have some unfinished business with him is certainly not, there's nothing on my mind in that regard.
Well, I thought it would be more of a jealousy thing on his end, that maybe Linda had a affection for you as well. That's kind of how I read it. I didn't really think of Paul on it.
I have no idea, how she represented me to him.
Yeah.
I don't know what she said about me to him, but there was nothing nothing serious between me and Linda. I was just like a fascination for her for a while to take pictures with. But, we never... we barely shook hands,
Yeah, well, it's a cool little story. I'm glad you kind of finished that up. But I'm at 20 minutes, and again, all right, man. Well, thank you so much.
Well, we'll see you out there somewhere.
North Tonawanda, we'll see you.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much, and give my best to Paul too. Thanks so much.
Will do. Take care. Bye.
All right, well, probably not the cleanest ending there, but when you go live, it's a little bit different than when you pre-record these things, and you can get rid of all the warts and all that kind of good stuff. I actually just sitting here hanging out in my living room with my dogs and all that other stuff, but we'll throw this one up in the audio archive, see if it's worthy of inclusion, and see how this little experiment worked. But just want to thank everybody for listening. I haven't done a night and day podcast in quite some time, so this is sort of a return to that concept. I've got my other podcast, Music Connects People. Who knows? I may even try an episode of that this afternoon as well. But in the meantime, thanks for listening. This is Thom Jennings, your host, saying thank you so much. And, please share, please subscribe, all that kind of good stuff, and help me grow this podcast.